Hong Kong has introduced a controversial overhaul of school education to bring it in line with the national security law implemented last June. The changes will see children as young as 6 being taught about national security. School students were a visible part of pro-democracy protests that gripped the city in 2019. The changes are being seen by many as an attempt by Beijing to solidify long-term control over the city.
Mr. Ao, what is national security?
A cartoon to explain a crackdown. Mr. Owl is helping children understand the power relations between Hong Kong and China, as well as the need to maintain them.
National security affairs are of utmost importance to the whole country.
Hong Kong's new education guidelines will teach children as young as 6 about the security law and its main offences. They require teachers to be on guard for anything deemed subversive, including books in libraries and flyers on school notice boards. The reaction has been mixed. I'm a little worried about the independent thinking abilities of primary school students in the future. I think it's okay to teach national security within the country, but my concern is about the reduction of good content in general education. It's a good start. No matter who you are or where you're from, you have to love your country. A decade ago, another attempt to bring Hong Kong schools in line with China triggered protests and spawned a generation of activists. In 2012, tens of thousands of students staged marches and sit-ins to demand an education free of communist influence. Then student activists such as Joshua Wong and Agnes Chow went on to become leading figures in Hong Kong's wave of mass protests and increasingly violent unrest against China's tightening grip on the territory. Both Joshua Wong and Agnes Chow have now been jailed in a widening crackdown on dissent. China is now trying to reassert its influence on Hong Kong classrooms. Its new curriculum both a lesson and a warning.
Be a law-abiding and responsible citizen.
Joining me now is Colin Lai, an executive committee member at the Hong Kong Professional Teachers Union. Welcome, Mr. Lai. These changes to the curriculum that have been ordered, would you call them an attempt at brainwashing or education?
Yes, it certainly put a lot of constraint on what we can teach. We used to emphasize critical thinking in our curriculum. We allow the students to have different positions on social issues and some national issues as well. But now the newly introduced national security education has put a lot of limits on what we can discuss and the standpoints that we can hold.
Now, the Education Bureau has said in the past that, quote, fostering students' sense of national identity is done in other countries as well. That sounds like a reasonable argument, doesn't it?
Yes, there's our position as well. We never say no to national education. We know that, of course, now we are under the rule of China, the Beijing government. Of course, we have to learn about our identity as a Chinese, and we need to care more about national security. But we might be thinking that maybe the government is a bit too sensitive about these issues in schools. That's what we are worrying about.
As a teacher yourself, how do you think this sort of change in education will affect the way students act and think?
Yes, they're actually putting a lot of constraints on what we can teach and talk about, and they also have very specifically defined roles for different levels in the school hierarchy, up from the founding organization of the school board, to the principal, to the teachers, to the students. They're all very strictly defined. So, for example, one of the things that, according to the new regulations, is that if the students sing songs with political messages, the schools, they are encouraged to report to the police. So that certainly limits the freedom of expression in the school, and also it breaks down the mutual trust between the school and the students.
So from the way you're describing it, Mr. Lai, is the choice in Hong Kong right now between another generation of Joshua Wongs or Communist Party acolytes?
In the past year or so, obviously we see a lot of youngsters coming, joining different political activities, and of course there are also a lot of challenges by the government in pleasing our teenagers. And we, as educators, we think that we should talk about these issues in schools freely because it's useless for us to indoctrinate them or to give them a certain political stance and ask them to believe. So now the new curriculum and the new regulations are limiting our freedom to do so.
Colin Lai, we'll leave it there for the time being, but of course, a lot more to discuss potentially at a later date. Thank you so much for joining us today, sir.
Thanks for having me.